Hello and welcome to Banana Box 2024 for Mac. In this video we're going to take an in-depth look at all of the new features in Banana Box 2024. First though, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the new RealTracks and other content, a quick look at some of the major new features, and then I'll delve into those features and the content in a lot more detail later in the video. We've been busy and added over 50 new features and an amazing collection of new content, including 222 RealTracks and RealDrums. There are also new MIDI super tracks, including modern pop styles that use SynthMaster, which we introduced with Banana Box 2023. There are new instrumental studies. We've added more songs with vocals artist performances, with brand new original songs featuring new artist performance Banana Box song files with accompanying audio vocal tracks. There are new extra styles with Extra Styles Pack 17 and X Pro Styles Pack 6 and more. There's also a Real Combos Booster with new RealTracks and RealDrums added to the Pro and Mega Pack, along with lots of new styles. We have new Look Mom More MIDI styles. There are new Playable RealTracks Set 3 and Playable RealDrums Set 4, which allow you to customize the RealTracks and RealDrums performances with the exact notes you want, and all of the new sounds have accompanying audio demos. There are new RealDrum stems, which allow you to access the individual WAV files from each different mic used to record many of our most popular RealDrums. We have bonus packs with 50 additional new RealTracks, so in total an amazing 272 new RealTracks and RealDrums are available. In addition, there are over 100 new Real styles that use the new RealTracks. These include new requested 60s soul jazz with legendary drummer Mike Clark. There are funk and R&B horn section styles, which not only include the ensemble tracks, but also include the individual stems, so the horns can be on separate tracks, but playing perfectly in sync with one another. There are exciting New Orleans piano styles with pianist extraordinaire Kevin McKendry. There's a set of Southern keys, including organ styles from Charles Treadway, and more great electric and acoustic pianos from Kevin McKendry, including funky clav styles. And we've been listening to our customers. There are lots of RealTracks that we recorded specifically because of requests from our users, such as world styles with exciting new Chinese instruments, including guzheng, ditsé, pipa, and erhu. There are also instruments with South American origins, such as the requested Siku panpipes and bongos. There are great new modern country styles featuring explosive layered guitars from RealTracks favorite Brent Mason on guitar, and 14-time winner of the ACM Drummer of the Year Award, Eddie Bayers. A subset of modern country is bro country, and we have new styles for that genre as well. There are also new vintage country styles with that old classic 50s country sound. These styles feature country swing and country waltz grooves with pedal steel, electric guitar, acoustic and electric bass, and a RealTracks first, tic-tac baritone guitar. This style is a distinctive playing method where the baritone plays bass notes with a muted tone, giving it that great classic sound. These styles also feature a new RealTracks artist, the legendary Doug Jernigan on pedal steel. We have new praise and worship styles. There are requested LA pop styles. requested modern metal styles, and more requested prog rock styles. There are new fast bebop comping piano styles, as well as more new two-hand piano soloing styles. We've added to our Southern Soul RealTracks with new guitars from Nashville great Brent Mason and veteran pro Pat Bergeson. There are modern pop RealDrums, which work great when paired with our Synthmaster MIDI Super Tracks. And in a similar vein, we have requested reggaeton. There are new indie folk guitars and banjos and more. And there are over 50 new features in Band in a Box 2024. These include many major new features. First, there's a new tracks window, similar to most DAW tracks windows. This shows all the tracks, allowing lossless data manipulation of tracks in an environment familiar to DAW users. The new tracks window includes specific support for creating loops and phrases using content from RealTracks. Major GUI enhancements include a MultiPicker tabbed window. This is a one-stop shop to pick styles and individual tracks from any of the 8 track types: RealTracks, RealDrums, and more. There are now floating windows everywhere, whereas previously most windows were modal, meaning they couldn't be open when you were doing other tasks in Band in a Box. We now have floating windows for styles, RealTracks, RealDrums, and all the other track types, as well as the bar settings dialog, track settings, chord options, and more. Partial track generation for every track type is added. Bar settings and rest, shots, holds, etc. can be made for all 24 tracks, both by entering these in the bar settings dialog or by using handy shortcuts. The new chord progression builder allows you to interactively create your own progression by showing you the best next chords at any point in your song. There are over 800 custom MIDI tracks with demos that users can add as single MIDI tracks that follow the chords. The playback engine speed has been enhanced to speed generation and renders. There's support for reading LyricLab AI-created song files. In the MultiPicker, you can now set favorites for any track type. There are new data filters for tracks, and more. And there are over 20 exciting new features in the Band in a Box DAW Plugin, including near-instant playback direct from disk to audition various styles without creating new audio files. You can now load chords from MIDI files, and there's support for shots, rest, holds on utility tracks, and more. So before I dive into the new features, for those of you who may not be familiar with Band in a Box, I'll give you a brief overview of how it works. Band in a Box is an auto accompaniment program that allows you to type in any chord progression in any key, and it generates backing tracks for you. This is an amazing tool for practicing, songwriting, composing, teaching, and music production. And that's what you're hearing right now. Everything you're hearing was created simply by typing in these chords, picking the style, setting the tempo, and pressing play. Band in a Box then did everything, and you can enter any chord progression in any key. I'll highlight this by making a few changes to the chord chart here. First, I'll change the key of the entire song to D minor. Now I'm going to change a few of the chords. I'll start off with F7, and I'll actually have that play for a full 4 bars. At bar 5, I think I'll type B flat 7, and then maybe E flat 7 here at bar 6. And of course, it can be more complex chords like E minor 7 flat 5, and I'll type A7 flat 9. I can also change the tempo. Maybe I'll make it a little faster, 125 beats per minute. And now I just have to press generate and play, and we'll see how this sounds. So now this file is a great way to start exploring some of the new features. For starters, let's look at the great new Tracks window. This is similar to Tracks windows seen in most DAWs, allowing lossless data manipulation of tracks in a familiar environment for DAW users. You can see the track labels and descriptions on the left here, and they basically mirror everything from the mixer with all the controls for volume, pan, and more. These tracks can also be used with the drag-drop station the same way you can with the mixer. I can use the scroll wheel to scroll through all the available tracks, and I can use Command with the scroll wheel to adjust the height of the tracks. In the main area, I can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And when the zoom is close enough in, it also displays the chords on this timeline. And you can press this button to enter a mode to edit phrases and loops. These phrase segments give you a visual representation of the phrases put together by Band in a Box to make up this particular performance. And these phrases can be edited. For example, I'll zoom in here. And this phrase here on the drum track represents what's being played between bars 17 and 22. And let me just listen to that there. So there was a little drum fill at the end of this phrase, and then it started with a crash to start this new phrase off here. So what I'm going to do is move my mouse to the right side of this, and as I do that, you see the icon changes to this icon with an arrow pointing left and right. So what I'm going to do is click and drag that and let it go right around here. And I'll zoom into that area again. Now, I have Snap currently selected, but I'm going to turn that off because I want to have more control over exactly where the end of this phrase is that I'm setting. So I'll put it right here just before that new drum hit there. So I'll zoom out again a little bit. And let me start just before there now. So we now heard just the crash at the beginning of that phrase, but because I've shortened it now, the drums cut out at that point. Now I'm going to zoom out again, and we can see the drums come back in here, but there's a new section here at bar 25. So maybe I'll delete this one as well. So just clicking on the entire thing, I'll press delete. So drums will come back here, and we'll play a little fill to lead into bar 25 there. But if I zoom into that even more here, actually I'm going to change one of the settings here. I'm going to go into settings, and I'm going to set it to zoom into the edit cursor rather than the mouse pointer. So now that I've clicked on here, my mouse can be anywhere, and if I zoom, it's going to snap to this point here. So now here was the segment I was looking at. And let me just play it here. So I'm going to shorten this a little bit so that it starts right here. So it's still going to play the fill, but it's not going to just start playing right at the beginning of the bar line there. All right, so I'll zoom out again. So there you go. I've edited these phrases so we still hear the beginning of this section right here on the drums, but just a quick crash. And then we hear the fill at the end that's going to lead back into it. So the drums are just taking a little break for 8 bars there. So that was kind of cool, and now I'm thinking maybe I might want to do the same kind of thing with some of the other instruments. I'm loving the bass part, so I'm going to leave the bass just going all the way through there. But on the Guitar 1 track here, we have a baritone guitar. So I'm just going to take out some of the phrases in there. Maybe I'll take it out for 4 bars. So if I just click here, that phrase lasts for 1 bar, so I'll just delete it. I'll delete the 2nd bar, 3rd bar, and the fourth bar. Actually, I'm going to zoom into the fourth bar here, and maybe I'll have it come in at maybe this note here. It'll start playing and then lead back into there. So let me hear how that sounds now. Yeah, that was kind of cool. I think, though, I want it to be even more sparse in this part. So I'm just going to take out all of these rhythm guitar parts here. Maybe here I'll zoom in and have it come back, have the rhythm guitar come back at the same time the drums are coming back there. Yeah, that's kind of cool there. Okay, and I'm thinking maybe I want to try the same thing with these horns. So the horn section RealTrack here is horn section, background, R&B, funky, 3-part. And that's the RealTrack that was generated for this song. But I'm using the RealTrack stems feature so that even though they were all generated together and are playing basically the same arrangement, I have them all on separate tracks. So that gives me a lot more opportunities for editing the parts. So for example, when those drums come out, I was thinking maybe I would have just the bari sax and the trumpet play together without the tenor sax, just to make it a little more sparse. So this is the trumpet, so I'll leave that. But on the tenor sax track, I'm going to pull this back so it just plays the first note here of this little phrase here. But then the tenor is going to cut out, and the trumpet and the bari will continue. I'll just zoom out again a little bit here. And I'll take out this entire section here still for the tenor. And maybe I'll let the tenor come back here. This will actually be kind of cool. If you look at these phrases here, the trumpet and the tenor are now playing together, and it looks like the bari sax is playing some low notes just after those hits. So that actually might be kind of cool. So let me see how that sounds. All right, yeah, that was a neat little section there. So now I want to do something else with the drums for these last 8 bars here. I was thinking to give it more of a powerful ending, I would have the drums play a crash every 2 bars. And the way I was going to do that is to use the looping feature with these phrases. So first of all, I turned off snap earlier, but I'm going to turn snap back on, because with the loops, I want them to loop exactly at the bar lines. So I'm going to zoom in here again and make sure this segment is starting right at the bar line. And then I'm going to bring the end of it and have it end here at exactly bar 35. And once I start looping this, I think I'm going to have it go all the way to the last bar before the ending. So I'll shorten that one. Now I'm going to go back to this phrase again. Now, I showed you earlier that when I move my mouse over the end of this, it has that icon that's a left and a right arrow. But if I move it up to the top of this, you can see the icon changes to this, and this is now the looping icon. So if I click and drag this, you can see now it's put this dotted green line here and here, indicating that that is now the point where this 2-bar phrase is actually looping. So the crash that occurs here at the beginning of it will now occur here as well and here as well. Let me just zoom out again, and now I'll bring this and continue that loop all the way to here. Now that it's in loop mode, I don't have to have my mouse near the top. I can have it here. Once it's in loop mode, it stays in loop mode like this. So let me hear just that now. Okay, so now let's just listen to the whole edited part, starting with the area where I pulled out some phrases to create a bit of a breakdown, and going to the end with the looping of the crashes on the drum track. We're now going to have a look at some other new features, including the chord progression builder and the MultiPicker library window. I'm going to create a song from scratch using the chord progression builder, and then I'm going to use the MultiPicker library to try out styles and add different kinds of tracks to it. This portion of the video will also be available as a standalone bootcamp video. So I have a blank chord chart here in front of me, and I'd like to start working on a new song, and I have kind of a classic country song in mind. I currently have grow.sty loaded as the style, which is one of our new X Pro 6 styles. These X Pro styles are designed to work with the Pro version of Band in a Box and also add a lot of RealTracks and RealDrums for the Pro users. But these styles are also brand new for our Megapack and our UltraPack users as well. So for this song, I don't really know what the lyrics or anything will be yet, so for now I'll just call it My New Country Song. So I'm going to leave this song in the key of C, with the first chord being a C chord. But to continue along from here, I'm going to use the new chord progression builder, which can be opened either by control-clicking and selecting the chord builder or by pressing Control-Shift-H. And then I can just click on the progression builder tab. So I want to start entering new chords at bar 2, and because Band in a Box 2024 now uses floating windows for a lot of these types of windows rather than modal windows, that means I can interact with the program even with this window open, which you couldn't do in the past. So if I want to start on bar 2, I can just click on bar 2, and in the dialog it's now showing the current bar here as bar 2, and the current chord is C. So there's currently no chord here in bar 2, but the last chord entered was here, and it was a C at bar 1. So in this dialog, the C chord is highlighted in black. That means that's the current chord, and then all of the suggested chords that would be good chords to come after it are highlighted with colored squares around them. The ones that are blue would be the most common chords to come after that chord, and then there's usually one or two interesting chords that are highlighted in orange. So these chords wouldn't be quite as common as the other ones to come after that first chord, but they often have a cool sound and can take you to new places when you're putting together a progression. So once I actually enter a chord here, it's no longer going to show me the best chords for this bar, it will show me the best next chord. So before I actually enter a chord here, I want to hear what the different chords it's suggesting will sound like. So I can shift-click on any of these chords to hear what they sound like without actually entering them in. And I generally like to hear the current chord first so that I can then hear what the next chord will sound like coming after it. So I'll shift-click here on C, and then I'll try some of these others. Let me try out this interesting chord, D7. Yeah, that was kind of cool. Let me try C7 instead. Yeah, I think I'll enter that at bar 2. So you'll notice when I finally actually selected that, it changed all of the suggested chords in here. That's because even though we're still in this chord and entering a chord would enter it here, it's not actually now telling me what would be good chords in this cell. It's telling me what would be good chords coming after it. So I want to enter a chord now at bar 3. I'm just going to move this window down a bit so I can see the chords under it. And now again, because it's a floating window, I can click in bar 3 here. So you'll notice that now the list of chords it's suggesting is actually quite smaller than it was before. And the reason why is that C7 in the key of C pretty much wants to go up to F. And so F, F7, and even F over A would be good choices to come after that. G7 would also be good, but I think F is definitely a good choice for this bar here. So I'm just going to click F. Now, this is also a good time to kind of explain this dialogue a bit further. You'll notice that the top row here is labeled diatonic. That means that all of the chords up here only contain notes that are in the key of C. That is, all the notes in these chords are part of the C major scale. As such, this top row is kind of a safe one if you really want to stick to simple pop or simple country progressions. As we go down here, we then see that there are dominant 7th chords. These will often make your song sound bluesy, or they might sort of push you in a different direction. Like a C7 chord or an F7 chord will sound kind of bluesy. An E7 chord will kind of push you towards an A or A minor chord. Then there are slash chords, which in the case of these ones listed here, are common major and minor chords within the key, but with different bass notes. Parallel minor means that the chord has the same root as up here in the diatonic list here, but they're minor instead of major. I'll shift-click again so that I can hear these chords without actually entering them in, but if I was to go F to F minor, you can hear that's a fairly common pop progression as well. Then we have diminished and half-diminished chords. And at the very bottom here, we have the ability to enter any chords we want. So all 12 chromatic notes are down here, and if I click on one of these small buttons beside the root, it gives me a full list of all the chords with more common ones up here. But then there are also these submenus here where you can select things like D9, sharp 11, D7, flat 9, flat 13, etc. One other important thing to keep in mind is that if you've already entered some chords, like I've done here, if I click on a bar that already has chords in it, it's not going to show me the best chords for my current position. For example, if I click in bar 2 here, it's not showing me the best chords for this bar. I have to delete the chord first, then move out of this cell, and then back in, and now it's showing the best chords to come after this C chord. But I'll undo that by pressing Command-Z and continue on. So now I'm looking for a chord to come after this F chord. So again, I will shift-click to hear what the F sounds like, and then maybe try G after that. Yeah, not bad. I'll see how going back to C sounds. Yeah, I think actually I'll go C there. And I think I'll let that C go for 2 full bars. So I'll find another chord now for bar 7. So again, I'll listen to the previous chord, and then maybe a G after it. Yeah, I think I'll go G there. And actually, it's showing G7 as a good chord to come after G, so maybe in bar 8, I'll go G7. So rather than continuing on here at bar 9, I think I'd actually like to just repeat some of this, so I will go Command-C to copy this, and then Command-V to paste it. And then maybe I'll try and find a good chord for bar 14. Again, shift-click on C to hear that. And then, yeah, I'll go G. And then maybe back to C. Oh, and actually now I see that after C here, a good chord would be C7. So maybe at bar 16, I will go to C7. Now, like we saw up here at bar 2, when you have a C7 chord, it kind of really wants to go to F here. Again, there are a couple of other options here, but I will go to F here at bar 17. And I think I'll actually change it to a B part marker. That means it actually changes from an A substyle to a B substyle. So the drums will likely change what they're playing. Some of the other instruments as well might change the way they're playing too. So it's like as if the musicians are switching from a verse to a chorus or a bridge, that kind of thing. Although I was just remembering, as I mentioned earlier, the chords in the dominant area here can often make it sound a little bluesy. So maybe for this section, instead of an F, I'll play an F7 here to give it a bit of a bluesy bridge. And I'll let that go for 2 bars, so maybe at bar 19, back to a C. And maybe I'll just do the same thing again at 21 here. So some possible chords for here: C, D minor, G, G7. And for an interesting chord option, it gave me A flat. So I'm going to shift click to see how that sounds. Now I think having an interesting chord like that might take it out of the classic country vein, but maybe having a slightly more modern twist just in this little part, that might be a bit of a neat juxtaposition here. So I think I actually will pick that. So now I will just move this out of the way once more. And I think for the last 8 bars, maybe I will just copy these and paste them. All right, so now I think I'm ready to hear how this song sounds. Actually, I think I'm going to skip ahead to bar 17 here, just because I'm interested to hear how this A flat chord is going to sound there. And now we're going to look at another major new feature, the new MultiPicker library window, or just MultiPicker for short. This floating window is a one-stop shop to pick styles or individual tracks from any of the 8 track types: RealTracks, RealDrums, loops, user tracks, MIDI super tracks, custom MIDI tracks, MIDI soloists, and melodists. All of the pickers show a common interface with a similar look and function, with filters for searching to find exactly what you need for your song. It allows selection and generation of the whole or partial track. Demos, memos, and multi-column information are available for all of them. There are a couple of ways to get into the MultiPicker. There's a new MultiPicker button. F7 is a quick and easy shortcut. And you can also just type in, as if you were typing a chord, M, enter. Now you can see up at the top there are individual tabs for all the different track types, but at the end I currently have the Styles tab selected. And I'm going to keep that selected because I want to first find a good style for this song that I just created. This is meant to be an old school country song, so I want to find a style like that for this. You can see that there are currently over 10,000 styles to choose from in this list, so I'm going to have to do something here to narrow this down to find exactly the style that I want for this song. So the familiar song title feature is something that has been in the style picker previously, and I'm going to use that right now here. As I was entering this song, I kind of had something like Your Cheatin' Heart in mind. The chords are different, and I don't want it to be exactly like that, but that's kind of the type of song that I had in mind as I was entering that song. So here, I'm just going to type Your Cheatin'. There we go, and I don't even have to type any further. It's giving me 3 different versions of the same song, so I'll pick this Hank Williams one here, and I'll double click on it. You can see that it's automatically entered filters here based on that song. So we can see it's entered filters for country, 4/4 time signature, swing 8's groove, near 130 beats per minute. And now that it's entered that for me, I can actually fine-tune these filters as well if I have some other things in mind. For example, country is a very broad category within Band in a Box that also includes similar genres that might not technically be country, like folk styles, bluegrass, etc. I want to get more specific, so you can see here where it says everything country, there are also some more options, and I think I'd just like to pick country classic. And after I finished entering that song, the tempo ended up being 115 beats per minute, and I actually kind of liked it there. I don't really want it to be much faster than that, so I'm going to change the tempo in the filter here to 115. You can see for the styles in the list, this column shows the ideal tempo for the style, but all of our styles work well over a fairly wide tempo range, maybe 15% lower than the ideal tempo, and maybe up to 30% higher than the ideal. So with these in the list, some have ideal tempos of 110, 115, 120, and all of them would be perfect for my song. And so now you can see that that list that was previously over 10,000 styles has now been narrowed down to show only 226 styles. That's still a lot for classic country at a specific tempo and a specific groove, but that at least makes it a little easier for me to kind of narrow it down. So now I want to sample these styles and find one that I want to use for the song. And not only do I want to hear what the styles sound like, I want to hear what they sound like on my song. So we'll go to Options here, and then I'll go to Set Dialog Options. So here I'm going to set this to play a preview when auditioning. What that means is that when I sample these styles, instead of playing a pre-made demo, it's actually going to generate all the tracks over my chord progression. And I also want to have it set so that I can just double-click on the styles in the list and it will play my chords. I could also allow it to change the tempo to the ideal tempo for the style, but as I pointed out before, the filters I added made it so that all of the styles in the list will work perfectly for my song. So I'll leave that off, and so I'll press OK. One final thing I'd like to do is sort this list by date, because I'd like to have the most recent styles at the top so I can check out some of our new RealTracks. And when I start sampling these, I'll also be demonstrating another great new feature where generations and renders are now way faster. I'm also going to move the MultiPicker out of the way here so that I can see the chords being played in my chord chart as I sample these different styles. So I'll just start double-clicking on a few of these to hear what they sound like. And this one actually sounds exactly like what I was after for this song, so I'm going to keep that style. So now I'm going to explore the MultiPicker a bit more. The Styles tab, as I mentioned, was for picking full bands with multiple instruments. All of the other tabs in the MultiPicker are more geared for picking individual instruments. As such, you'll notice that they all have a slightly different layout from the Styles tab, but then that layout is mostly consistent for all of these Tracks tabs. You'll see the track window up here where you can select the track you want to use to select individual instruments. And as I mentioned before, this is a floating window, unlike the old RealTracks picker, RealDrums picker, etc. This means you can interact with the other elements of the program while the window is still open. For example, as I click on the different labels in the mixer, that also selects those tracks in here. Now, as I mentioned, the Styles tab had a slightly different function than all the other tabs and therefore has slightly different filters. So the filters I entered in that dialog aren't carried over to these tabs, but I can easily enter similar filters in here. Another new feature is that the song titles filter we saw earlier can now also be used in these individual instrument pickers too, so I'll do the same thing. And like before, I could fine-tune these filters. And now, since all of the individual tracks tabs are quite similar, you can see that now if I switch to these other track types, it actually has carried over the same filters to them. And also similar to the Styles tab, I can have double-clicking or a spacebar play my chords rather than the pre-made demos. So for example, I could select the bass track, add another little filter to just show basses, and then I could try out some different basses over this. But I think I'll stick to the one that was set in the style. Now this particular bass is actually two RealTracks in one. The A-B means that for the A section it's using this country swing in 2 RealTrack. And then at B it changes to this completely different RealTrack playing a walking bass line. But another thing you can do right here in the MultiPicker is do partial regeneration. And it doesn't need to be the same RealTrack as what's already on the track. If I want the bass to start walking 2 bars earlier, even though it's still part of the A section, I can just highlight these 2 bars in this chord sheet. Again, easy to do because this is a floating window. And then click on Partial Generation, where it is now populated here by the bars that I highlighted up here. So I can regenerate this range. And if I wanted a different generation, I could just try that again. This partial regeneration can also be done from the Tracks window, which has been added with Band in a Box 2024. The last 8 bars before the end is again set to A substyle, which you can see in the timeline here. If I play a bit, you can hear and see that the bass is playing in 2, that is, playing only on beats 1 and 3 of the bar. I'll do the same thing here, partially regenerate this so it walks in those last 2 bars. But the benefit of doing it here in the Tracks window is that I can actually be more precise. Rather than having to use exact bar lines for the regeneration, like I did in the chord chart, I can regenerate whatever range I like. For example, I could have it start halfway through bar 31. And again, I'll press Partial Regeneration, and we can see that now it's giving me a more precise range here because that's what I entered in the Tracks window. There are also additional settings in each of these Tracks tabs specific to those track types. For example, I could make this bass simple, which would make it avoid material within the style that might be a bit more busy. There are similar settings for RealDrums, but again specific to RealDrums. So for example, there's always a fill at bars before a part marker, but say for example I want to regenerate a bar that comes before a part marker and I don't want it to include a fill. Well, I can select this. And right now there is a fill at bar 8 because bar 9 is the start of a new section. You can see there's an A part marker there. So I'll play what's there right now on the drums. And so I'll highlight this area. And again, I'll select Partial Generation. I'll regenerate this range. and now there's no fill there. You can now set favorites for any track type. You previously could set favorites for RealTracks and RealDrums, but now you can set favorites for all tracks, for example, loops. I'm now going to take a look at the MIDI tracks. There are now over 800 MIDI tracks you can use in the same way you use RealTracks, RealDrums, MIDI SuperTracks. These are individual tracks from our huge collection of MIDI styles, with this feature enabling to use those individual tracks from those styles in whatever song you're working on. Now, I still have the same filters loaded, so that 800 has been narrowed down to these 30 items. And I'd like to actually add a piano, so I'll also add a filter here for that. And so that's now giving me these 8 items here. Now, I'll pick an unused track. The next one down from the tracks I've been using so far is the melody track. So I'll click on that to select it. And I'll also make sure I have it set so that I can double-click or spacebar to play my chords rather than the pre-made demo, which I do have selected. And now I'll try out a few options here. This one I think is a little too busy. That's not what I had in mind. That one's not quite right either, I think. And this one I think is perfect. I wanted something simple, classic, and I think that fits the bill. Now, there are other track types that I haven't looked at yet that are also included in this MultiPicker. The MIDI Soloist tab uses a very old feature in Band-in-a-Box that existed before even RealTracks or RealDrums were introduced and everything was MIDI in Band-in-a-Box. But this older feature is now so much easier to use since it's been added to the MultiPicker. I've cleared the previous filters to show the total number of MIDI Soloists available, 341. And I'll add back just a couple more filters. Country, 4/4, swing eighths. Now, what I had in mind for the soloist here is that I wouldn't generate a whole track, but maybe just pick 8 bars or so on this piano track that I just created, and just use partial generation to have it switch to a solo at that point. As such, as I sample these, I don't think I actually want them to be written on the track, I just want to hear a pre-made demo. So for now, I'll actually remove the check from double-click Plays Chord Sheet. So now I'll just click on a few of these to hear a pre-made sample, and I'll pick one that I think might work well. I think I want to try this one, Country Swing Piano. Now, the soloist has in the past typically been used on a designated soloist track. But I want this to actually occur on the same piano track I just added. So I'm going to remove the check here that forces it to the designated soloist track. So that means it can go right on this piano track. I'm going to move this dialog out of the way here. So I'll click where I want it to start around bar 17, and then I'll zoom out, and I'll shift click just a little past bar 25. So now, like before, I can go to Partial Generation, The Melodist is similar to the Soloist in that it can generate melodic lines to chord progressions, just focusing more on melodies rather than typical soloing lines. The kind of thing that could potentially be actually sung with lyrics and also using musical thematic material through a whole piece rather than just soloing over changes. In addition, it can also create chord progressions. So basically, it can create a song from scratch, including a title. Now again, like in the Soloist Dialog, a new feature is that you can hear samples of these melodists by double-clicking on them. You know what? I'm actually going to try that one there and see how it sounds. So before I generate this, I'm going to go into the settings here and I'm going to not generate chords. And also not generate title or intro. And I won't let it change the style. So basically, I just want to have it generate a melody here. So now I have to choose a track. I already used the melody track for that piano plus the soloist there. So I'm going to remove the check here, and I'm just going to go to the next track down, which happens to be called the Soloist track, but I'm going to put a melody on here. So I'll generate now. Now before I let it continue further, I just actually want to do a couple things first. First of all, I want to delete the melody in that portion where the other track is soloing. So that was at bar 17. So I'll just highlight the notes in here between 17 and 24. And the other thing I think I want to do here is use a different instrument. I'd like to add one of our new playable RealTracks, and you can access those in the HiQ Patch plugin menu item here. These playable RealTracks are great to use even when they're not in conjunction with RealTracks. So I want to use an electric guitar sound, so I'll filter by electric guitar. Now that still leaves over 600 sounds here, but I was thinking maybe something with tremolo. And it looks like there's actually some baritone guitars that have tremolo sounds. All of these playable RealTracks have corresponding audio demos, so I'm just going to listen to the demo for this one here. First of all, it plays the instrument by itself, and then further along, it plays it in the context of a band. So yeah, I think I like that one. I'm going to pick that one. So let's hear how that's sounding. Okay, so first of all, I want to select all of these and lower them by at least an octave. Probably 2 octaves actually would be good. And I also think it might be nicer if the melody was more legato. So it's actually a good thing that I did put this on the Soloist track, because despite the all tracks are equal thing, the melody and Soloist actually do have some extra features available to them, such as add legato staccato to Soloist. And I'll allow for an increase of up to a full bar, 480 ticks. And each note can go right up to where the next note starts. So you can see that now has increased the length of all of the notes here. So now let's hear how that sounds. One final feature I'd like to show you before moving on from this song is the Remembered Style Name feature. If you recall, as I was starting this song, I had grow.sty loaded as the style, and I saved it with that style before I changed to classic.sty. In the MultiPicker, a new feature is that style is remembered by going into Options, Revert to Remembered Style Name. The Melodist can also be used in conjunction with a new feature that's able to open LyricLab files. LyricLab is a third-party program that generates lyrics and chords for songs. These files can now be imported into Band-in-a-Box, where you can choose a style and generate melodies based on the song chords. So for example, I'm opening a LyricLab file right now. And you can see here it's imported the chords and the lyrics have opened on the lyric layer in the chord chart. If I now go back to the Melodist tab in the MultiPicker, I'll use a genre filter to find a melodist I want to use, maybe just pop rock. And now I currently do not have double-click or spacebar plays chord sheet, which just means I'll be hearing a pre-made demo of what this melodist sounds like, which is what I want right now. So now I'll just start double-clicking on a few of these and see if there's one that I like that I want to use with this song. And I think I'll pick that one. So first of all, I'll check the settings here. Now, I do want to enter a melody, but I want to keep the chords from the LyricLab file, so I'll remove a check from chords. And I do want it to use the style that's associated with the Melodist, but I don't think I need a title. And so I'll just select Generate Now. And now I have a melody to go along with that. In this case, there are, of course, a lot more notes than needed for the lyrics here, but it could be a jumping off point, and I could go into notation and remove a bunch of notes so that the number of syllables match up. We saw earlier how the MultiPicker and chord progression builders are now floating windows, making it possible to interact with the program while the dialog was open. Many of our other dialogues are now floating too. This is now also the case with track settings and actions, chord options, and the bar settings dialogues. And I'm going to demonstrate the usefulness of this feature using the bar settings dialog. This demo I currently have loaded is using one of our new modern country styles with multiple layered guitars. I'm going to open the bar settings dialog by pressing F5. And because it's a floating window, I can click on the chord sheet, which is very useful because this sets the bar number within Dialog. Another new feature is that you can now use these bar settings on utility tracks, which you haven't been able to do in the past. This style has one of the layered guitars on utility track 1. So for example, I could mute the guitar here at bar 16 and quickly and easily bring it back at bar 17. And the chord options dialog is also now a floating window. I have one of our new modern metal styles loaded, and I've added a synth pad to utility track 1. Now for bars 9 to 12, I want to enter a bunch of holds for various instruments. Now again, because it's a floating window, I can just click here at bar 9, and that gets entered here in this dialog. Now I'm going to have all of the instruments just play a held chord, except the bass will just continue as usual. And this is another feature as well. I can also select utility tracks to exclude. And so I'd also like the synth pad to ignore the hold and just keep playing as usual as well. Again, it's a floating window, so I can just click here at bar 10 and then do the same thing here as well. Now in both cases, you'll see that the dialog has changed the chord as it appears in the chord chart by adding 3 dots, which is the code for held chord, but then it added a B to exclude the bass track from the hold, and U1 to exclude utility track 1 from the hold. These chord options can also just be typed in like that. So I'll try that at bar 11. I'll type A for the chord, and then ... to indicate a hold, and now B again so that the bass track will just continue playing and not play just a held chord. And now I'll also type in G, so at this bar, the guitar that's actually on the guitar track will start playing normally as well. And then I'll also type U1 again so that the synth pad continues to ignore the hold. And you can see that even though I've now entered it in just by typing it here, it's also added all of that information to the dialogue here as well. And then at bar 12 here, again I'll type B minor, ... again, bass, guitar track, utility track 1. And actually here I think I'll also bring back in guitar 3, which is on the strings track here. So I'll type S. That's another thing, you don't have to type these in any particular order. As soon as I press enter, it just rearranges them itself. So now the only instruments that will be observing the hold will be drums and guitar 1. The other 4 instruments will all be playing as normal. And now I'll press generate and play, and we'll hear how this is sounding. The last thing we're going to look at in this video is some of the new features in the new version of the Band-in-a-Box DAW Plugin, version 6. This plugin is included with any purchase of Band-in-a-Box 2024 for Mac. The plugin can be used with any DAW that supports VST, AU, or AAX plugins, and features an interface very similar to the main Band-in-a-Box program, but with features making it uniquely useful in a DAW setting. I'm going to use a few different DAWs in this video, including Pro Tools, GarageBand, and Logic. But it also works with lots of DAWs not being shown here as well, such as Reaper, Studio One, and many, many more. Version 6 of the plugin now has over 20 new features. To start with, it now features near instant playback in the stylepicker. The stylepicker can now let you audition styles with the current song without having to render new tracks. So I'm currently using the plugin in Logic, and you can see here that I have the plugin open, and I've already entered some chords in there. Even though I haven't finished my song, I'd like to actually pick a style for this song, so I'll go into the style picker. And I'll move the style picker over here so that I can see my chords underneath. Now, in the past, if you wanted to sample different styles, you could double-click on them to hear a pre-made sample of the style. If I click on this plus button to go into the demo options, you can see right now I do not have double-click or spacebar plays chord sheet. So right now, it's the old method of playing pre-made demos. So I'll leave it like this for a second just so you can see how it used to work. But I've been working on entering these chords in my new song, so I really want to hear what all of these sound like playing that progression. So I'll now go back in here, and I'll turn this feature on. And now I'll do the same thing. And even though it's generating these tracks based on my chords, it's starting these styles almost instantly. I've now finished entering my chords, and so I'm going to show you another new feature in the Style Picker, render tracks directly in the Style Picker. So out of the styles that I sampled earlier, the last one, Facula Driving Slow Rock, I think is the one I want to use for this song. And now I'll show you another new feature, render tracks directly in the Style Picker, which I can access by pressing this new Render Tracks button. So first of all, this upper area lets you pick exactly what you want to render, with items relating to RealTracks and RealDrums here, and items relating to MIDI tracks here. In both areas, it has a checkbox that refers to the master. This is a stereo mix of all of the tracks. So selecting it in this area means RealTracks and RealDrums will be included in that master, and selecting it here means that MIDI tracks will be included in that master. So then in RealTracks, wave files should be selected if you want to have individual audio tracks for the RealTracks and RealDrums. And if RealCharts is selected, you'll also get MIDI available to go along with the RealTracks and RealDrums audio, which could be used for notation purposes. In the MIDI tracks area, MIDI files would give you individual MIDI available on those tracks, and Render to Wave would give you rendered versions of the MIDI. The style that I've selected is all RealTracks and RealDrums, so this area isn't really applicable to the style, so it doesn't actually matter what I select here. And then there are some preset buttons here, which just automatically put checks for a few different scenarios. MIDI just puts a check beside all of the items that would actually create MIDI files. Wave puts a check beside all of the options that give you audio, as well as RealCharts, which is MIDI but could be used to display notation along with the audio. And all just puts a check beside everything. Now, as I mentioned, this style here does not actually have any MIDI tracks in it, but it certainly doesn't hurt to leave these checked as well. So I'll just press Render Tracks Now. And now I can check this out by pressing the play button in the plugin. And of course, I have all of the individual tracks, so I can drag them into Logic as well. Another new feature is that you can now load chords directly from MIDI files. I've now got the plugin loaded on a track in Pro Tools, and so I'm going to open a MIDI file here. I'll select Load Chords from MIDI file, and I'll select violet.mid from the tutorials folder in my main Banana Box folder. And once that file is selected and opened, Banana Box automatically processes it and writes the chords to the chord sheet. I'm now using GarageBand, and I'm going to show you another new feature here. Shots, rests, and holds now work on utility tracks. I have the demo loaded for one of our new prog rock styles, and you can see that this style has a RealTracks set on 2 of the utility tracks. Entering shots, rests, and holds on utility tracks in the plugin works the same as the main program and can be done just by typing it in the chord chart, or it can be done in the chord settings, and I'll show you that first. So first of all, at bars 17 and 18, I just want drums, bass, and the single bends background guitar, which is on utility track 1. So I'll make sure I'm at the correct bar, which I am, and I'll choose rest, but I'll exclude bass, drums, and utility track 1. And you can see that as I did that, it's entered this text here. So C is the chord, of course. A single dot means it's a rest. B means bass is excluded from the rest. D means drums are excluded from the rest. And U1 means that utility track 1 is excluded from the rest. And now that text is actually entered in as a chord, meaning there will be a rest for all instruments except the 3 that I specified. And as I said, I wanted to do the same thing at bar 18, so I can just enter the same thing but with D as the chord instead of C. I want to do something similar at bars 19 and 20, but instead of rests, I want shots, where all of the instruments just play a short hit of the chord. 1 dot, as seen above, is a rest, and 2 dots is a shot. So I'll have all the instruments do a shot except bass, drums, U1 for utility 1, and U2 for utility 2, since I want that guitar to start playing as well. Now, what I typed is not displaying, but that's just because there isn't room. But if I resize the window, now I can see the entire thing I entered. And finally, I want the same thing at bar 20, but a hold instead where the chord is played and held, which is entered using 3 dots. And now I'll press generate and see how all this will turn out. For Reaper users, the plugin has built-in specific support for the Reaper DAW API, allowing direct transfer of band-in-a-box files to and from Reaper tracks, including tiny lossless files of instructions which play audio instantly from disk. There will be a separate video showing these Reaper-specific features in more detail. Check out pgmusic.com for more details. And finally, you can also check out even more new features with version 6 of the plugin by going to Preferences and Help, which takes you to our website where all of the new features are listed. We hope you enjoy all the great new content and new features in Band-in-a-Box 2024 for Mac and version 6 of the DAW plugin. Thanks for watching and have fun!